My name is Anna, and I am your classic misfit. When I was young, I would go to the beach with my family, and I would watch as other children picked up an array of seashells for their collections. I, on the other hand, was focused on picking up only one kind of shell. It was called the calico shell, and it had this beautiful maroon design, and I was once told that they are extremely uncommon. In fact, a lady said to me, if you can manage to find one that doesn't have any chips or cracks along the edges, well, then you have yourself a very rare find. And so year after year, I was singularly focused on only this kind of shell, simply because there just aren't that many around. Also, when I was young, I aimed to be stronger than all of the boys, but not in a good at sports way, more in a ruler of the playground sort of way. I also dreamed of being on Broadway, but let's face it, I still dream of being on Broadway. And I remember I once said to my cousin, I can't decide if I should be an Olympian or a chemist. So not your traditional fork in the road. And when you're young, you really dread this way of being and of not belonging, because life just tends to be a little bit harder. By its very definition, a misfit is somebody who just doesn't fit in with the traditional ways of living and thinking. And so as a result, we as misfits were ostracized, excluded, and definitely misunderstood. But we knew we had a clear choice to make. We could either fit in and risk losing just the littlest bit of ourselves, or we could refuse to fade into the background. And we could hang on tightly to those beliefs and those interests and those opinions, even when unpopular. So this is the classic struggle of the misfit. And these pressures start really early on. In fact, according to the International Journal of Youth and Adolescence, it was found that fitting in is a top priority among adolescents in high school, far more important than anything related to academic achievement. Additionally, the CDC has found that bullying affects 20% of high schoolers. So I would argue, more of us start off as misfits than we're acknowledging. However, this is a TEDx talk. This is not a performance in the Mortified series. And so why is this so relevant? Well, let's take a look at the misfit. The misfit isn't just somebody who doesn't fit the mold. A misfit is somebody who is brave enough to live and act honestly. Misfits are completely keyed into their passions, even when there are consequences attached to that way of being. Misfits never look to others for the green light before doing exactly what it is that speaks to them. Our misfits are our mavericks and our nonconformists. There was a study published in Forbes, and it was conducted by Elena Love, who is the president of Purpose Link Consulting. And she surveyed 3,500 people on the topic of passion. And her research stated that passion and purpose are integrally linked, like two strands of DNA that comprise the code for life. So, that would lead us to believe that if we're able to hone in on that passion, and maybe we combine it with a little bit of direction, a little bit of bravery, that eventually we'll find our purpose. But here's the key. We need the pathway. The pathway is the action piece, where our passion can be put into practice. Now, there are a ton of resources out there to date that really help us on that self-discovery, kind of more reflective piece of what is my true purpose. However, where I believe we continue to fall short in this society is on the pathway piece, because ultimately it's this pathway that's going to help us to catapult our impact to the next level. I distinctly remember being in high school and sitting next to a friend of mine as she was driving, and I turned to her and I said, I'm 18 years old, I haven't even graduated from high school, and already I am so ready to get off of this conveyor belt. So, some people compare life to a merry-go-round. I compared it to a conveyor belt. The theme is the same. There's this real lack of control. And when we're on these contraptions, we don't get much say on whether they start, stop, speed up, or break down. And I knew at that very moment in time, I wanted to control the lever. We are funneled through our educational and professional systems from the time we're this big. We're shuffled through elementary school, high school, into college, where we're funneled into majors, into graduate programs, and then finally into careers where we start at the bottom level and we work our way up. And at each piece of these funnels, we encounter what I like to call crucial micro moments of limitation. And with each one of these moments of limitation, we experience a mini concession. And with each mini concession, there's a little bit of that inner misfit voice that becomes silenced. There is an inherent problem with our pathways. We know when we're in these systems exactly what it takes to be successful. Just as when we were young, we knew exactly what it would take to belong. But it's leaving a lot of us empty. And we're waking up 1 year, 5 years, sometimes 10, 20 years into a career wondering, how in the heck did I get here? The Harvard Business Review found that fewer than 20% of business leaders have a strong sense of individual purpose. There is a major problem with our pathways. And before we can even begin to start to map out these solutions, we need to talk about the surrounding issues. And there are 3 big ones that I want to bring to your attention today. First and foremost, culture. So much about our pathways is embedded in our culture. And I once read, you cannot hide from culture. We are constantly sent messages to be better, to be faster, to be stronger, to be richer. And these affect our financial priorities. In the US, for instance, we much more value putting money into retirement and financial security than we do, say, a big overseas excursion. Now, I could probably make the argument that the latter is much more valuable. However, that's a different TEDx talk. It's not for today. The message is the same. It's actually really difficult not to fit in. And that is why, despite being told that we should dare to be different, shoot for the stars, go for our dreams, it's actually a lot easier said than done. In fact, it is harder now to be a misfit than it ever was. Generation Z is coming through the pipeline. They were raised post 9/11 in a war and a financial crisis at a time when peer acceptance and social media are everything. The Wall Street Journal even found that Generation Z, more than any generation on record, cares about being financially stable. This brings me to the second major issue surrounding our pathways. And I would argue this is the most important issue because it most silences that inner misfit. Somewhere along the way, we started to blur the line between achievement and fulfillment. And we are becoming led astray. There was a 2017 poll that found that as much as 85% of the population hates their jobs. I think that's pretty shocking. And the more we blur this line, the more we are confusing our priorities. Here's a perfect example of this in today's world. We as a society love to say that we love the misfit. We really do. We love to say that we love the entrepreneur who's disrupting the industry, who's going on their own, who's engaging in the hustle, and who's going against the grain. I would argue we do not like the misfit. Not even a little bit. What we like is the misfit who achieves scaled success. We love the rags to riches football star. We love that image of Jeff Bezos in his first year of Amazon with that rinky-dink Amazon sign taped to the wall. We love the misfit, but only conditionally. What we love is the success story. So this brings me to my next major point, and that is that the way that we carve out our pathways doesn't even serve those who wish to excel within the system itself. Think about that. The way that we have designed our pathway carving doesn't even serve those who want to succeed within the system itself. Perfect example of this is our competencies. I think we can all agree that as an education system, it is our job to prepare the next generation of leaders. I think that's a pretty fair statement. Not only do we have to make sure that students are able to solve problems, but as Adam Grant states in his New York Times article, we need to make sure they're able to find the right problems to solve. Employers are looking for students who can exhibit leadership skills, decision-making capabilities, and social intelligence. Yet according to the National Association of Colleges and Employers, only 11% of business leaders feel strongly that students who graduate from college have what it takes to be successful in the workplace. Additionally, not only are we not cultivating the correct competencies, we're not measuring them correctly as well. Did you know that grades are not a determinant of professional success? I didn't. This is probably a good time to admit to you that I spent my life as a devoted straight-A student. It's really upsetting. But it's true. There was a 14-year study conducted by Karen Arnold, and it was titled, "What Becomes of High School Valedictorians?" And what she found was that although people at the top of their class found career success, they weren't as likely to be future visionaries. As Adam Grant states, straight A's require conformity. A highly influential career demands originality. And this makes sense when you look at our current visionaries. J.K. Rowling had a C average. Steve Jobs graduated with a 2.65 GPA. And even Martin Luther King got 1A in 4 years at Morehouse. Our system of pathway carving doesn't serve those who wish to excel within the system itself. There was a report released by the Global Entrepreneurship Monitor, and it found that 27 million working-age Americans, that's nearly 14%, are starting or running new businesses. Now, this study is in its 16th year, and this is an all-time high. The same study found that 24 million US entrepreneurs plan to hire 20 or more people over the next 5 years, a 16% increase from 2 years ago. The World Economic Forum surveyed 350 executives to find out what are the top competencies that will be sought after in 2020. And far more important than any set of technical skills were skills like cognitive flexibility, creativity, a service mindset, and critical thinking. So, what's the moral of the story? The moral is we need misfits. Because at the end of the day, that boldness, risk-taking, individual thought, and a deep connection to purpose are what are going to be needed as the face of business shifts. So, what's the solution? I advocate we need a complete pathway overhaul. We need to begin exposing students to alternative ways of living and working. We need to start creating cross-cultural and cross-industry connections so that we are diversifying the set of offerings that we are presenting to the next generation of leaders. We need to provide students and professionals with that signage, the how, the action piece, so that not only can they find success, but way more important, fulfillment. This has become my own professional purpose. I am a lifelong misfit, and so I have worked to create the space for those of us who just do not fit the traditional mold. I'm the founder and owner of OutGrowth, and I create what I like to call unlikely misfit collaborations. I partner students with farms under the umbrella of sustainable professional purpose. In my model, one constituent's problem becomes the other's solution. One's strength becomes the other's real-world education. And so together, not only are we creating a new community of professionals, much more importantly, we're also carving out new paths. Because here's the reality. There is no better place to start in a pathway overhaul than with the farmer. The farmer is an often overlooked population of people whose work just will never fit the traditional mold. They work 365 days a year, 12 to 15 hours a day. They have expensive businesses with razor-thin margins, and they are at the mercy of Mother Nature on an hourly basis. But yet they're doing it. They're making purpose-driven decisions every single minute that combines science with art, with gut feeling. They're wonderful, wonderful people, and they need us. The USDA reports that there are 2.1 million farms in the US. 99% of those are family-owned, 91% are small farm operations. And they don't just need us as fellow farmers. They need us as small business supporters, environmental stewards, marketers, policy drivers. And guess what? We need them. The USDA reports that food production has to increase 70% by the year 2050 to accommodate the world's population. So, am I advocating that we start a future farmer training program? Not necessarily, but I do think there is tremendous value in infusing agriculture into the education system. What I am advocating for is that we start to find ways to translate that passion into pathways that have meaning for us, especially pathways we may have never considered. I'm advocating that we look to the farmer, both so that we know that they are there, and so that we can continue our very noble pursuit of purpose while they continue theirs. And maybe most importantly, I'm advocating that we take a hard look at our pathways. And if we start to realize that our purpose or passion isn't reaching its fullest potential, then we start to listen to that inner misfit voice. Because in the end, life is just too short not to do what we love. So, from one misfit to what I can only imagine is a sea of misfits, I think we have a huge call to action here. Instead of connecting students to career trajectories, what if we connected them to initiatives and movements and dreams and all of those wonderful blurry things? What if we all today committed to experiencing life before ever choosing a way of life? And what if in this moment we started to practice not fitting in? Because, my fellow misfits, the world needs us. The world needs us to shift cultural values and to improve our states of being. And if we can hone in on that little inner misfit voice, we will be one step closer to creating our own legacy. And with that, we will have the awesome opportunity to build a life that makes us want to get up early in the morning, just like our fellow farmers, and feed the world with our talents.